Chayton is a green school student. He's been in Bali for 6 years, and he just started his high school. He was born in Japan, lived in Singapore for 6 years before moving to Bali with his family. He enjoys surfing, playing guitar, marimba, basketball, technology, and Zumba. No, I'm gonna ask him to dance Zumba later. Tonight, Chayton will cover the topic of addiction, including the types, root causes, and whether the war on drugs is working or not. Heavy topic, eh? So please welcome on stage, Chayton Thompson.
Hello? Okay. No, it's good. How many people here believe they have an addiction? In the book In the Realm of the Hungry Ghost by Gabor Mate, he says, addiction is where we constantly seek something outside ourselves to curb an insatiable yearning for relief or fulfillment. The aching emptiness is perpetual because the substances, objects, or pursuits we hope will soothe it are not what we really need. Addiction impacts absolutely everyone. We live in a world where we are constantly surrounded by substances and activities that have the potential to be addictive, and we need to understand the cause of addiction before we can help it. So, what is addiction? Well, a simple definition is the 4 C's. Craving something intensely, loss of control of how often it's used, continued use, despite the consequences. This applies to all addictive substances like cigarettes or alcohol, or behavior like gambling, technology, or work. All pleasurable activities release dopamine in our brains. It gives us meaning, purpose, and belonging with others and with ourselves. When you're with people you love or having fun with friends and family, dopamine is released. But over time, addiction-induced dopamine rushes can alter the brain, resulting in dependency or tolerance of the drug. Here are some statistics. There are 20,000 deaths a year from illegal drugs in the US, mostly from heroin and secondly from cocaine. There are 25,000 deaths a year from prescription drugs in the US. Interestingly, 80% of heroin users started off with prescription drugs. There are 85,000 deaths related to alcohol each year in the US, 3.3 million deaths worldwide, and there are 440,000 deaths related to tobacco each year. 6 million deaths worldwide. However, there is one major drug that the CDC doesn't recognize: sugar. Who here thinks that it is? Well, studies show that sugar activates the same regions of the brain as cocaine. It's in everything from processed foods, drinks, and even cigarettes. 20% of a cigarette is sugar. At the moment, the CDC links 800,000 deaths a year in the US to type 2 diabetes, which is highly linked to consuming too much sugar. So while there are 20,000 deaths a year from illegal drugs, there are more than 2.5 million deaths from legal drugs in the US. Maybe we're fighting the wrong war. But there are also addictive behaviors like gambling, technology, work. Technology is now a major part of our life, and it affects everyone, especially my generation. Now with smartphones, it's almost impossible to get away from it. Some of us are almost dependent on it, and I know personally that I can use it too much. So now that we know a little bit about addiction, what causes addiction? Well, back in the 1970s, scientists took rats and put them in empty cages all alone with 2 water bottles. One with normal water and one with water laced with heroin or cocaine. The rats got addicted to the drug water and eventually died. This experiment made people think that drugs were physically addictive, uncontrollable, and that has been the accepted theory for decades. A psychologist named Bruce Alexander noticed that the rats were bored and lonely and had nothing else to do except use the drug water. So he created Rat Park, which was a fun, big area with lots of things to do and lots of other rats to interact with. Given the choice, the rats didn't choose the drug water. He took his experiment further and put the rats in empty cages all alone with 2 water bottles. One with normal water and the one with the other drug water. He put the rats, then he moved the rats into Rat Park, and the rats slowly stopped taking the drug water all on their own. But this isn't just with rats. The closest human comparison to the Rat Park experiments was the Vietnam War, where 20% of US soldiers were using a lot of heroin. But when they returned home, 95% of them just stopped. So being in the war was like being in the empty rat cages, and coming home to their friends and family was like entering Rat Park. So from researching this topic, I think one of the main causes of addiction is the lack or absence of love in someone's life, not having the feeling of comfort or not being able to attach yourself to something. I think growing up without comfort or love from family and friends, especially after trauma, makes you tend to pick something else to comfort you, and a lot of the time, that substance or behavior becomes your addiction. And even if you do feel content with your life and your work, maybe your addiction eases you of your everyday duties and responsibilities. My Aunt Carrie is a social worker. Her clients are HIV positive and suffer from severe drug addiction. Most of them are homeless, often prostituting or stealing to get their next hit. All of her clients suffer from significant childhood trauma. The hardest part of my aunt's job is being part of a system that she sees traumatize these people even further by decriminalizing these drugs. She joins a large number of professionals that strongly believe that the first step to this is decriminalizing all drugs and even going as far as to legalize them. In 2001, Portugal decriminalized all drugs. Portugal had the highest rate of HIV and drug use, and now it has the lowest. So we need to think about addiction differently. The rat experiments in Rat Park in Vietnam demonstrate it has less to do with the physical addiction and more to do with your environment and human connections. Addiction is just one symptom of the disconnectioning happening all around us. Now with bigger living spaces, shopping, and technology too, the war on drugs has not worked at all. It's cruel and has resulted in more suffering for everyone. So if we are not experiencing meaningful connection with the people in our lives, it is human nature that we'll try to bond with something else, whether it's technology, alcohol, sugar, caffeine, work, alcohol, or even heroin for some. It's not about individual recovery anymore. It's about social recovery as a group. And to start our social recovery as a group, hug your neighbor. Thank you.
How was that? You're amazing, man.
Thank you.
Thank you. So first question, what's the secret behind his gorgeous hair?
My father.
Your father. Yeah, I'm not going to ask more about that. Right, who has questions here? Anyone, come on. Why did you pick this topic?
Well, we were discussing it over dinner one time, and I found it so interesting, and I read into it further, and I also had to do a project for school at that point, so I ended up doing a presentation.
Yes? What was the statistics that surprised you the most?
Probably the fact that I didn't realize that there was so many deaths from legal drugs there's still so many deaths from illegal drugs, but I didn't realize that there was so many from legal drugs.
Anyone? Other question? Yeah?
So what did you learn about connection now?
What did you learn about connection now?
Well, I mean, it's being attached to something. Like some people have their, we have our friends and family that we can have attached to and have comfort and love from. But then if someone grows up without that or with abuse from their family, then the thing that they can connect to and be attached to is their drug, usually like heroin or cocaine. Yeah.
Other question?
Why do you think that decriminalization works?
Why do you think that decriminalization works?
Well, because there was an example of it where they completely legalized it in one place in England where they were giving out just heroin and cocaine and all sorts of drugs, and it brought down the HIV, the stealing, and all the stuff in the neighborhood because the drug dealers left, they were getting no business, people were getting clean needles and clean drugs, and it made, yeah.
Last question then. Here.
Where in the world is your rap park?
My rap park?
Yeah.
Oh.
See, like, where is the thing happening?
Yeah, probably at here in Bali or at like Green School or something.
All right. Thank you, Chayton.
Thank you.